Welcome to the 30-day novel NaNoWriMo series. This is day 11. My name is Lynn Johnston, and I blog at writesmarternotharder.com. As always, we want to think about how we're going to move the story forward today. Today, your protagonist is feeling the full brunt of the first pinch point. That means that whatever encounter they're having with the antagonist or the antagonist forces, or just the antagonist influence, how the antagonist is influencing the setting that the protagonist is moving through. Whatever they're encountering today, it really needs to squeeze the protagonist. You want your protagonist to be suffering and feeling hemmed in or trapped or otherwise experiencing loss or sacrifice or some sort of burden as a result of that encounter. And also it's probably going to impact any of the protagonist's allies. So today, how is your protagonist going to wrestle with his or her flaw or wound or defining trauma as a result of encountering the as a result of encountering the antagonist and or the antagonist's power? And this is really the second big event on your protagonist's character growth arc. In the first plot point, your protagonist had to make a decision. They had to make a sacrifice, or they had to basically accept that in choosing whatever they chose during that crisis, they gave something else up. And that was the kickoff of the character growth arc. This is the second step where your protagonist, not that they might not have changed a little bit as they moved out of the first plot point and moved towards the pinch point, but here's where your protagonist's flaw or wound or trauma is going to rear its ugly head again, and the protagonist is going to have to wrestle with it. And that's going to be triggered by whatever aspect of the antagonist that the protagonist is experiencing here in the pinch point. So this is another day that you really want to think character development. Not just what happens, but how does it make the protagonist realize that they're flawed? How does it make the protagonist realize that they could be doing better? How does it make the protagonist want to be a different person? Other characters. How are the other characters going to be impacted by your protagonist's inner struggle during the first pinch point? And if your protagonist has an ally or a traveling companion or people that they're interacting regularly with, it should impact the other characters, at least in some small way. Your protagonist is not going to be at their best as they're wrestling with that inner demon or that flaw that's being triggered. And it should impact your protagonist's relationship with the people around him. It could just be that the protagonist has a shorter temper and lashes out. It could be that the protagonist is withdrawn because they're focusing on their inner struggle and they are therefore less helpful to the other characters. Maybe the protagonist actually makes a mistake because they're so mentally wound up about the thing that's upsetting them and trying to figure out how to get that inner demon to shut up and leave them alone. Maybe they miss something important and one of your other characters gets hurt as a result, which of course is going to make the protagonist feel guilty, and further encourage him or her to wrestle with that inner flaw or inner demon. In terms of your story's conflict, do the protagonist and his or her allies encounter the antagonist or the antagonist forces or some problem in the setting created by the antagonist's actions? And also, how does this encounter with the antagonist's influence make things worse for the protagonist and their allies? So if your protagonist is traveling and they're hoping to get to this village by nightfall where they think they're going to get helped, and then they get there and it turns out, oh no, the antagonist went through yesterday and basically razed that village to the ground, and now all the people that the protagonist was hoping were going to help him or her, now they're refugees and they're going, hey protagonist, maybe you could help us. So whatever it is that the antagonist has done that is really making the protagonist feel their influence, make sure that it it interferes with your protagonist's ability to achieve their goal, and it makes things worse for the protagonist and their allies. Is there anything in your setting that works against the protagonist as she or he deals with the antagonist's influence? Or is the protagonist able to use something in the setting in order to combat the antagonist's influence? Maybe the antagonist came through the same area hours ago and set part of the forest on fire, and maybe your protagonist and their allies are basically having to improvise and fight the fire using elements in the setting to do that, to put out the fire that the antagonist started. So always look to your setting. Your setting could be a source of conflict, or your setting can be an opportunity to resolve conflict. It can offer resources that your protagonist can use to overcome other obstacles in the setting. One thing that Jim Butcher is really famous for in his Harry Dresden novels is that he will actually throw multiple problems at Harry Dresden, and often Harry will be able to use the consequence of one problem to solve the second problem. Or he will, if the problem is two different enemies that are both trying to get him, he'll find a way to turn them on each other, or have one of them get caught in the crossfire of the other. So always look to your setting, and that includes non-player characters or very minor characters who maybe don't even have personalities. If your character is running through a crowded marketplace, all the people in the crowd who he will never know the names of are an obstacle that makes it harder for him to catch the antagonist who's running away with something that he stole, for example. So, story promise. What are you going to promise the reader has changed as a result of what happens today in the first pinch point? And there's going to be an inherent promise in the character's inner struggle. Basically, if you show your protagonist struggling today with his flaw or his inner demons as a result of what happens to him today, that's basically telling the reader, hey, this character really is going to try and change. You're not necessarily promising to the reader that the character will change, but you are promising that they are going to see a character growth arc in the rest of the story. And there may be other things that you're going to promise the reader. Maybe it's going to become really apparent in this first pinch point that what the protagonist thought would be a good goal is going to be a terrible goal. Maybe it's just going to become really, really obvious that whatever is going to come next, it's going to be really outside your protagonist's comfort zone, for example. Getting started. As always, do your pre-writing ritual, do your warm-up exercise. If you can reread what you wrote yesterday, or if you can read it out loud to yourself so that you can hear what you wrote yesterday, or just go over your notes and make some new notes on your character sketches, or tweak your plot outline. Whatever you can do to get into the story so that it's easier to write, please do that before you start writing. And it doesn't have to take long. You can basically have your entire pre-writing thing, including the ritual and a warm-up exercise and just a few minutes at your notes. That can be just like 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Second, I just want to say that if your story is starting to run out of steam, if you're going, oh no, I got off to kind of a good start and my character encountered a big problem and they started trying to solve it, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting here looking at this blank Microsoft Word file and going, oh my gosh, I don't know what happens next. I strongly recommend that in addition to the character's goals and motivation, which we've talked about before in other videos, also look at the stakes. What could your characters lose? What could your characters gain? How could you threaten your characters? How can you make things worse for your characters? What is really important to your characters? If you know that, then you know what you can take away from them to make them suffer. You know what kinds of problems you could throw at them that would be really high in drama because they will struggle to solve them. If your character is trying to save the world, those stakes are kind of abstract. Make it personal. What does your character personally lose if he or she fails to save the world? For example, if the thing that's being threatened is that like someone is threatening to contaminate the world with evil magic, your character should suffer personally in some way if your antagonist succeeds, whether it's because the tainted magic is going to make them and someone they love sick, or it's going to make it impossible for the protagonist to pursue his or her life's dream. Whatever it is that is important to your character, look at how you can connect the big picture story goal and the big picture stakes with your character's personal stakes. Whatever it is that your character wants, and if you go back to their flaw and their defining trauma, often that holds the secret to what the character wants. If your character's defining trauma is that he felt unloved as a child, like his parents were really cold and they ignored him a lot, and he just never felt like he could make them happy, that inherent in that is what your character wants. Your character wants to feel loved, and your character wants to feel like he's making the people around him happy. That's his goal. And so you start looking at the stakes and what he's trying to do. Whatever his goal is, if his goal is to save the world, you want to tie that to somehow him wanting also to be loved and to make the people around him happy. And sometimes that's a little tricky to do. If you've chosen a good story goal for your character, it's easier. If it's really hard for you to tie that together, you might want to look at your story goal, and you might want to look at maybe your character's defining trauma needs tweaking. But regardless, look at what your character can lose, look at what they want, and those stakes are a fantastic source of conflict, because you don't even have to take what the character loves away from him. You just have to make it look like there's a possibility the character's going to lose it. And as soon as anyone who loves something realizes that they could lose it, they will do whatever they have to do and solve whatever problems they have to solve in order to make sure that they don't. So that's how stakes contribute to conflict. After you write, I encourage you to celebrate your progress. As always, you're trying to establish a habit, and those little rewards, in fact, there's a lot of evidence that small, consistent rewards are way more effective than big rewards in establishing habits and changing behavior. If you're trying to establish a writing habit, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to write for 30 days, and at the end of that, I'm going to buy myself that thing I always wanted. I'm going to take myself on a weekend vacation to San Francisco, or I'm going to buy myself this dress I've been longing for the last 6 months. Instead of like going for the big reward, often a small daily reward is more effective. And you miss that daily reward. You feel the impact of it right now, instead of having to contemplate in the abstract the possibility that you're going to lose a big reward later. It's like that. I can't play my video game like I was hoping to because I didn't hit my word count today. Is more motivating. So think about small rewards. Always celebrate your progress. And of course, always do whatever it takes to get ready for tomorrow, so that tomorrow it's easy to just jump in and get started. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you had a great time. Happy writing today. Best wishes on your story. I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.